I'm Sarah Moon, she, her pronouns, a modern classroom expert mentor, an elementary instructional coach, and interventionist here in Durham, North Carolina.
I'm Tavia Clemendor, she, her pronouns, distinguished modern classroom educator and expert mentor, and I teach biology in Reedsville, North Carolina.
And I am Monty, she, her pronouns. I'm a middle school science teacher, modern classroom mentor, and I currently reside in Atlanta, Georgia.
All right. Before we dive into today's topic, we want to give a shout out to all of our new implementers. We love seeing you on this journey and appreciative of your questions and willingness to share with us. For those of you that are new to our Facebook group, we celebrate 2 members a week. You both get a sticker, and a member of the month who gets a free t-shirt. These members are chosen because of their engagement, thought-provoking posts, and or sharing of resources. Thank you to all of you and keep contributing. All right, Sarah, let's move on to our topic of the month, grading.
So this is definitely a hot button topic. So we are super excited to be able to kind of go through some of our thoughts and some of the things that implementers and MCP educators have shared along the way. Really thinking about how can we correlate our grading policies with the mastery-based and self-paced learning structures. Because as we know, we show this graphic at the beginning of every single episode. If you're at all familiar with MCP, you've seen this graphic. There's 3 main tenets of the Modern Classrooms project. And so we've been looking a lot at self-paced structure, and now we're going to be thinking about that mastery-based grading and how that kind of integrates with self-paced structure and that blended instruction. So when we're learning in a modern classroom, there's 3 main parts, right? So first we have that main instruction part. Instruction is when students are engaging with whatever that might be, whether that be a instructional video, whole group collaborative activity, small group instruction, one-on-one, and they're gaining that knowledge needed to be able to show mastery. Once the kiddos have engaged with that instruction, once the learners have engaged with that instruction, then we move to assignments, right? And those assignments are that practice that students are doing in order to develop mastery, right? So I'm gaining the knowledge needed. Then our learners are developing mastery, and absolutely those assignments can be collaborative, right? We talk a lot about how despite some of the misconceptions and some of the thoughts, just because we've all been through the 2, almost 3 now years that we've been through, that when we say blended instruction, we think of like, oh, that kiddo like all by themselves with that laptop, right? And that's not true. Kiddos can really be collaborative. They can really be developing their mastery, bouncing off ideas from one another. Then once kiddos have had the chance to develop the mastery, that's when we come to those mastery checks, right? And those mastery checks are short end of lesson tasks. It can also be those end of unit tasks, those summative assessments, but all of those different types of assessments that allow that student, that learner to demonstrate their knowledge, right? And typically, like it said, these are individual. It doesn't mean that you can't do a collaborative mastery check. You absolutely could. But this is kind of the progression of learning that we have within a modern classroom. So then when we're looking at those mastery checks, we have to think about mastery criteria, right? What are we saying when we're saying kids are mastering this? What are we saying when we're saying kids know what they need to know for that objective or for that lesson, right? So mastery criteria helps learners understand what is considered mastery, right? And it really helps define it for kiddos so that it's not just like you as the educator up there saying, you have to do this, right? They're really able to set that goal, whether it be you saying, how many corrects they need or what level they need. Maybe you're using a rubric, maybe you're doing accuracy, right? But it just really cues that kiddo, that learner into what do we need to do to accomplish this task. And sometimes we see educators have it be consistent throughout a course. You know, some educators are like, all right, it's always going to be 90% accuracy. Some educators, myself included, kind of change it up based on the activity, concept, skill. I like to kind of go back and forth between accuracy, rubric, depending on the activity. But again, you as the educator, you know your classroom and your content the best. And so you have that, that knowledge to go ahead and make that decision. But we do want that to be communicated to learners. So again, it can go ahead and aid in that goal setting. when those learners know exactly what's expected, it decreases that anxiety and that stress. We've been doing this a lot in my current setting. The kiddos are shooting for 75% mastery because that's what we're looking at for our standardized testing as well. And actually, I just have to lift up, there was a baby the other day I saw at the top of her, it was a district assessment, so it did not have the mastery criteria on the top because I had not created it. And on the top, she put, I need to get a 75% or better. And I was like, oh, baby, you do. Like, and it was such a great example of kiddos really tying into that mastery criteria and setting those individual goals. However, though, we also know that revision is so important because kiddos aren't always going to get it the first time, right? Learners in general aren't always going to get it the first time. If you are a learner that has always gotten it right the first time, let me know because I want to know your secret. But revision helps learners master that concept or skill, right? And revision can take so many different forms. Maybe it's an error analysis. Maybe it's an educator having conversations, right? Maybe it's redoing the same mastery check. Maybe it's a different version. And it really just allows learners to embrace and learn from their mistakes. And it also goes ahead and steers away from perfectionism, right? It takes away, again, that stress and anxiety of, we know you're not going to get 100% every single time the first time around, and that's okay because a huge part of the learning process is that revision piece. And so with this, we typically see two types of grading structures. Some classrooms, educators, district schools are doing more standards-based grading. And so for those that may not be familiar with standards-based grading focuses on the understanding of the standard or the objective as a whole. And so typically it's some kind of variation of 3, 2, 1, with 3 being like, you get that standard, awesome job. 2, you kind of get that standard, you need a little bit more support. 1, not quite there yet. Let's go ahead and do some revision and do some reteaching. So standards basing, again, kind of focuses on the understanding of a standard versus other schools, districts, classrooms may incorporate traditional grading. And so traditional grading is, I would bet money, what most of us have grown up with. And so that focus is the overall grade for the course, right? And so this is when we see categories, we see different weights. So homework is 20%, assessments is 40%, et cetera, and those letter grades coming into play. So all of that to say that there's a lot within grading, not only within a modern classroom, but I think just within classrooms as a whole. And so that was just kind of like a quick interview or a quick overview. And we'd love to go ahead and share some more from our show host. So Monty, do you want to go ahead and kind of take it away? Oh, Monty, you're on mute. I can tell that you're taking it away and you're taking it away perfectly. There we go.
So before we really dive in to talk about, what we do in our classrooms, as always, we really want to emphasize that there is no right or wrong way to do this. So if you find yourself struggling and you're saying to yourself, I just want to make sure I'm doing this right. Remember, there's no right way to do this. However you do it is the right way to do it. Do what makes sense for you. And as you'll see in a second, I'm so sorry. Hello, child. I'm so sorry. It's my niece. I'm gonna start that whole part over. She came in naked. Anyway, yes. So before we really dive in on talking about how we do this in our classrooms, please make sure that you understand that there's really no right or wrong way to do this. We see in the Facebook group pretty often where people will say things like, I just want to make sure I'm doing it right. And just understand there's no right way. Do whatever makes sense for you. Whatever you do is the right way to do it. And so as you'll see in a bit, we all do things differently, and that's totally okay. So Tavia, how about you start us off talking a little bit about how you've done grades in your modern classroom?
Well, I do use percentages, but mastery checks count as an assessment. Mastery checks and unit tests count as an assessment. So those are, at the end of the day, what's the biggest percentage in my classroom. And then they do have a classwork grade, which is usually like if they have to do a practice, or in this case, their videos. Some of their videos are graded, particularly if they don't have a practice, it's just a video. I want to make sure that you watched it and kind of understood those questions that are embedded. But I do more of a mastery-based approach as far as final grading. If you didn't do well, let's say on your videos, but you're acing the mastery checks, you're doing something right. So it's very subjective, I guess, to say when I grade, because I do kind of try to look at everything as a whole, no matter what the grade book may actually say. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
All right, that's kind of how I do it. What about you, Sarah?
So I have always done standards-based grading. I've always been in a district that has done standards-based grading. So we use a 4, 3, 2, 1 scale. So 4 means that they're doing the standard at the next grade level. So we have to really be aware of our vertical alignment, really make sure that we're giving students opportunity to test at that level, to assess at that level. 3 means that you've mastered that standard, you got it. 2 means you continue to need some support with that standard, and 1 means we're not quite there yet. We need to go ahead and make sure that we have those support plans in place to hopefully move up to that 2 or 3. With that standards-based grading, I definitely saw when I switched to the MCP method that my kiddos finally got the standards-based grading. I think standards-based grading, especially for those of us that are used to traditional, can be kind of tricky. I typically use the cupcake example for 3, 2, 1. And so I say, 3 is like a great cupcake. You got cupcake, your icing, everything's all good. 2 is you just have your cupcake. You don't have any of the icing at the top, but that's okay. We'll get there. 1 is the batter, and 4 is those cupcakes that are super expensive that you have all like the bells and whistles and sprinkles and all of that, which kind of helped my kiddos get it. But when we started doing mastery-based learning and when we started doing revision, like kiddos really got it. And not only that, but it was really motivating for my kiddos, that motivating for them to really pay attention to their revision and pay attention to their making sure that they really mastered each mastery check, because they knew what standard each one was with, and they knew that they were getting those 3s with every single one. Monty, I think you have had some different experiences with grading than I. Would you like to go ahead and share those?
Yeah, so I do want to preface that, we have really great people in the Facebook group. And so we have lots of, different posts and comments about traditional grading. So if you find yourself and you're in a traditional setting and you're struggling to understand how to set up your gradebook and whatnot, the Facebook group is such a great place to ask that question. In addition to that, I recently created kind of a spreadsheet of topics. And so please definitely also check out that spreadsheet of topics, because there's a lot of conversation in there about grading, especially for those of us that are in more traditional settings. But I today would like to touch on IB grading. And part of the reason why I want to touch on IB grading is because we're starting to get a huge influx of folks that, work in PYP or MYP or IB settings. And we're really trying to understand, we're really trying to understand how we wrap our mind around grading. So back when I was in DC, I worked at a public charter school, and our school didn't have traditional grades. Everything that we graded was mastery based on the IB scale. So for my IB folks, that's a 1 to 8 scale. And if you're an IB, I think 1 to 7. And that's what students got on their report card. And so, the first 2 years I worked at the school, I did not use Modern Classroom. And then I switched to Modern Classroom, the third year. And I actually think that Modern Classroom works super well with IB grading, if that's all that you're doing, because again, we were a mastery-based school as well. So my students actually were used to not getting any grades for anything except for summative assessments anyway. So of course, I didn't really have to spend any time around, figuring out, well, how much percentage is classwork worth. I only still just graded their summative assessments. And so I know sometimes we're like, okay, well, when do you fit those summative assessments in? Again, I think it just depends on your content, how your class is structured. I was grading things like essays, and yes, we write essays in science, lab reports and projects and things like that. And again, I would just pause the kids and we would do them together. I know that, and this is going really deep here, but when I did my internship, we were an IB school. and they also did traditional grades. And so in that case, I would just, find some sort of method that makes sense. I know, people are fans of doing like 40% of your grade is this. But like I said earlier, just do what makes sense for you. And that'll be what it is. And I know we have this deep ingrained fear that if we don't attach a grade to it, the kids won't do it, but it's actually not true. I promise you it's not true. If the kids see the work as important, and again, as the teacher, it's your job to make them see that it's important. They'll actually do it a lot of times without a lot of pushback. And you have your kids that will give you pushback, but most kids will do it.
Yeah, I teach IB, so that's very interesting. You brought that up about that 1 to 7 scale. They're trying to push us more so they can see that. IB is wanting to see that more on a 1 to 7 scale as opposed to that ABC. So it's very interesting you brought that up. That's what I'll be playing with this summer, trying to figure that out. Anywho, so we get asked a lot of questions about grades, and we're taking some frequently asked questions to talk about. One of the greatest questions we get is whether or not you should grade everything. Like Monty was saying, that's like completely up to you. I wouldn't advise in grading everything. You'll drive yourself crazy. The idea is to not only make a system that's efficient for your students, it's also to be efficient for you. So it's not important to grade everything. That brings in that kind of idea of the importance of that backwards design. So when you work from the end to the front, you can kind of see what needs to be graded and what doesn't. It kind of helps to decide what needs to be graded. For instance, some videos I grade, some videos I don't. It just depends on the nature of the video. Do I grade every single thing they turn in? No. Do they know that I'm not going to grade it? Not all the time. They just, like Monty was saying, they see it, they do it, and don't really question it all the time. So I would say that no, it's not important to grade absolutely everything that the students do. What do you think, you guys?
Yeah, for my sanity, I say absolutely not. And again, I'm really thinking back to when I was in DC, and even last year when I was in Florida, I did in no way graded everything, even though last year I wasn't really using Modern Classroom, nor was I in a master-based situation. I still didn't grade everything. But like Tavia said, you have them turn it in, you have the expectation of like, I might grade it, I might not. My kids never really knew, and maybe that's mean, I don't know, but I would give them feedback. I think feedback is important, but I'm not sometimes spending my time like grading it, because I think it's very easy as teachers. We already have limited time, and I just think if we're grading everything, we're going to drive ourselves crazy. So I say, especially when you're first implementing this, just take it easy. If I'm being completely honest, I mean, I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm giving you some really good advice. Take it easy.
To add on to Monty, when you just said like, I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm giving you really good advice, that was like perfect, like mama or auntie advice, right? Like that's just like exactly what I thought. Like, well, I'm not telling you what to do, but I would really want to lift up from what you said is like, I think language is so important here because there is a difference between feedback and grading, even though I think a lot of times we lump them together, right? Do I give my kiddos feedback on everything that they do? Absolutely. I think that goes into making it meaningful, right? I'm never going to make a kiddo just do something to do something and they're going to move on with their life. I'm absolutely going to look over it real quick, say, hey, I love how much you're focusing on doing that. Hey, I love how careful your notes are this time, right? I can definitely give feedback without grading everything. Because in my head, when I think grade, I'm thinking I'm giving a 3, 2, 1, I'm giving a percentage, right? I'm really checking that. And that typically I reserve for the mastery checks, but then that feedback can really not only emphasize the importance of doing that assignment for kiddos, but I think that feedback can also make sure that when kiddos get to that mastery check, they're as prepared as they can be, right? And I think Monty and Tavia, I think you both said, you don't have to grade everything for kiddos to do it if they see that it's meaningful. And when we do mastery-based learning and we can really set up that learning pathway so that kiddos know like, hey, if I do A, B, and C, I'm going to be really successful on the mastery check, right? And if I'm incorporating my teacher's feedback on A, B, and C, I know I'm going to master that. And that can be super powerful and motivating for kiddos as well. All right, so I think that one is checked off, and definitely, again, lifting up how Monty has said, we have that absolutely incredible spreadsheet that she's created that you can go ahead and click back through. Lots of other implementers, ideas about grading in general on there. Another question we get, go ahead, Monty.
Sarah, sorry, I'll make sure to link it in the show notes just in case you don't know where to find it in the Facebook group. I'll put it in the show notes. It's also pinned to the top of the Facebook page, and I also add it to the weekly post every week. So it's in a lot of different places, but I'll make sure it's in the show notes for everybody.
Great thought, Monty. Thank you for that. Another question we get asked a lot is, how do you factor in the different tasks into your grading? For me personally, since I am standards-based, I don't really have to, for lack of a better word, think about it, because all of these tasks just help them lead to that overall goal of mastering. I will definitely say, because with standards-based grading, typically you do have that level that's the next level. I make sure to make it super clear to my kiddos which tasks typically they're aspired to do, although also I've had kiddos that I'm like, y'all are rocking this unit. This next level task is a should do, because you guys should do it because you're absolutely rocking it. But whatever that task is, that gives them the opportunity to test for that 4. I make sure to make that very clear to kiddos, so that way they can factor that into their decision about which ones they're doing as well. Javia and Monty, do y'all want to kind of share with the percentage based or the IB based how that looks like?
I think with the IB piece, it doesn't truly matter, because at least, you know, in my experience at DCI, because we were mastery based, whether something was, you know, classified as a must do, should do, or aspire to do, it almost always was classwork. And so we didn't attach a grade to classwork. I think last year when I was, you know, in Florida, and, you know, I did do some must do, should do, and aspire to do work, I just added, you know, different, you know, weights. So, you know, must do work was 80%. So, you know, if you did all of the must do assignments, that automatically got you that 80%, you know, threshold for your grade. And then doing the should do, you know, upped it up to 90%. And then doing the aspire to do, you know, could increase the grade to 100% for classwork, because I had to have a classwork grade last year. And part of the reason why I like that structure is because, I mean, I think most of us could agree that a B is like an okay grade. And a kid should get an okay grade for doing the work. In no way should they get a failing grade or anything like that, because again, they've done the minimum work. And I think an 80% is typically what is classified as mastery. And so I said, okay, if you do 80%, you know, you've passed your mastery checks, you automatically get that B for your classwork grade. And then if you do more, you know, I just increase it for every lesson up to 100%.
I do it a couple of different ways, depending on if it's an IB course or if it's a non-IB course. My IB courses, their assignments is broken into must, should, and aspire to do. And the must do is the basic or the understanding. They have understanding, application, skills, and natures of science. Those are how their standards are broken down, standards. So the must do is the very basic of the standard. The should, that gets them, mastery for me in IB course is an 80. So that gets you an 80, and the student has the option if that's all they want to do. The should do is usually an expansion upon that goes a little deeper. And then the aspire to do is usually some kind of real life application of it. That's where they can really show that they've learned the material and can apply it. So each, as opposed to having something a different percentage, they kind of can choose how far they want to go within a lesson. And it still kind of equates the same way. If you want an A, you know, you have to do the aspire to do. In my non-IB courses, it's kind of certain assignments might be should do. All aspire to do assignments are optional. But must do's you have to get through. Should do's are usually based on their mastery path that they're put on. So everybody won't see the should do. So kind of the same thing with Monty. Mastery for me in a non-IB course is around a 75. So if you can get through at least your must do's and master your mastery checks, then you'll at least get that much.
And one final question, and this one comes up quite frequently as well, is what do we do grade-wise if the student is behind pace and they didn't get to some of the lessons before the deadline or a unit test? And so you can approach this a couple different ways. The greatest thing about me, if you've been around the Facebook group for a while, I say this all the time, I'm a micromanager. So I actually self-pace my students by lesson. And so for me, this is something that would honestly never occur, because again, I make them go together by lesson and I move everybody to the next lesson at the same time. Again, it's just my way of truly controlling the situation. And maybe one day I will learn to lose some control, but right now is not the time. And so for me, if I did say have a student who didn't finish, say, lesson 1, but I made them move on to lesson 2, normally how I approach it is I either do one of two things. Either you owe me some lunches where we need to get it done, or you do it for homework. And again, this doesn't necessarily qualify for students who, have, IEP or 504 that, says that they might work a little bit slower. But this is just for my kids who they love to talk. And I'm a fan of let them talk. And then you're going to do your homework later. You're going to do your work later. So I actually typically don't have this problem, but I would say find other ways. Like if you're someone who, gives them the freedom, I would say make sure you're capturing it way before the end of the unit. Like we typically can pinpoint if a kid is behind. I would capture it way before you get even halfway. Like if you see a kid is still in lesson 1, intervene. But if you find like, oh, I have a kid who's 3 lessons behind and we're about to finish up, create some sort of plan with them to get the work done, cut out the unnecessary stuff. I know the Aspire to do, assignments are super great and we want them to do it, but like, it's okay if they don't, I guess, but create a plan with them and hold them accountable for getting it done. And then if you create a plan and they don't follow through, natural consequences. I think you can, put the 0 or 50 or whatever it is that you do. I think that would be okay, but I would only do that after I've spoken with the kid, maybe looped in their parents as well to say, hey, they're behind. Here's the plan we came up with. Here's when they need to have it done. And go from there.
And I think as well with this, just like you said, we can definitely catch up kiddos a little bit quicker, right? We can see that they're behind pace quicker. Definitely check out some of our other Facebook shows that we've talked about how exactly to pace and kind of how the thought process behind what is on pace. But I think also with this, how I've always approached it is the kiddos that are typically possibly behind at the end of unit test are the kiddos that historically have not been able to access education the way that they need and deserve, right? And so because of that, because of how the modern classrooms model is, I might have a kiddo that only got to 7 out of 10 lessons, but those 7 lessons they mastered. They know those 7 lessons, and they know those 7 lessons or 70% of that unit way more than they would have ever known any traditional teaching unit. And so because of that, what I've typically found is like, we might, me and the kiddo might sit down and be like, hey, for XYZ reasons, we did not get to lessons, 8 and 9. So question 11 and 12 on your unit test might be a little difficult. However, all of the rest of it, and I bet you could really apply some of your knowledge to try your best to figure those out. Because I definitely, when I'm creating my deadline or when I'm creating my unit test, they're typically over multiple standards, right? And so because of that, kiddos can kind of take what they know and apply it. And even though that kind of sounds bad when it comes out of my mouth, that's how testing is in general, right? And so what I have found, not only to be comforting to me, but also comforting the kiddos, is like they can apply what they know, but what they know, they truly know it because they've mastered it. It's not like, hey, I've been here for the 10 days. I've technically been in the room, right? It's, hey, I've been here for 10 days. I have mastered X, Y, and Z. And I know that when I see X, Y, and Z on that unit test, I'm going to be able to truly show what I know versus hoping that I remember something that I sat through.
Absolutely. I agree with kind of both of you. I'm with Monty. I tried to foresee and catch problems before they happen. That's why, the pacing tracker is such a big deal. Because not just for the kids, it helps not just for the student, it helps keeps us kind of on track too, to kind of see what's going on in the classroom. So I try to catch them before they get too far behind. And the same ideal, I deal with high schoolers. So we have a period that's called Pride. I can bring you in for Pride. You can sit down and take some stuff, but know that the due date, the test date is this day, and where you are is where you are. So yeah, I might knock off some should do's. Those aspire to do's we know go out the window, but you have to at least get through the must do's. And it may be to where I alter the assignment part and you just at least get through the videos. But and it also, it's a lot that plays into that. Like Monty was saying, 504s and IEPs, what kind of student, what's going on with this student. So it's a lot of things you got to take into consideration when you're considering what to do on how to help a student finish up.
Yeah, and I know, we have general overall concerns about, students with supports in place, but I will say that, a lot of times they do rise to the occasion, and I don't think we need to be as worried as we are. And I'm not saying, make sure they get their accommodations, but I think sometimes we're so worried about whether or not they're going to do the work, or, they're going to get so far behind. And in my experience, that hasn't been the case. In fact, sometimes some of my students that are behind are just, like I said, the ones that just like to talk, they're chatters. And, they blink and they're like, what? 35 minutes have gone by? I'm like, yeah, you talked about Super Mario Brothers for 35 minutes. It's fine. So, I say all of that to say of like, the kids can do the work. And I think we have the trust in the process and trust them to do it. And of course, if they don't, then we intervene. But anyway, that's pretty much all we have for today. If you want to learn more or explore more about some of the things that we talked about for today, be sure to check out our show notes and explore the website for more information. We will record one final show for this season. Season 1 is ending soon. We're like a real TV show. We have seasons. And we will be taking a short break over the summer and coming back, stronger and better in August.
Exciting news. The first Wednesday of each month, we will host a Twitter chat to talk more about continuing learning. So come join us at 7 p.m. If you have more questions, want resources, wants to widen your network, anything you can imagine, that's the place to be. If you don't know what Twitter chats are, you are in a brave space because we are also still learning. So let's learn together. Make sure you you follow us at Modern Class at Modern Class Proj ! And that's every first Wednesday of the month.
And so that is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate all that you do for your students and their families, and we appreciate you.
And let's change the world one lesson at a time.